The word you use for this entered the French language to rhyme with the word for mandrake root. That is not a joke about etymology. A poet needed a rhyme. He wrote a word that had never been a French noun before. And 70 years later, occultists across Europe were using that word for one of the strangest ideas in Western esotericism. The idea is this: when enough people hold the same thought with enough attention for long enough, the thought stops being a thought. It becomes something that acts. Something with an appetite, something that can outlive every person who fed it. That is what people mean today when they say egregore. The word did not mean that, not at first and maybe not ever, according to one of the most careful scholars who ever looked at it, but something is happening. You have felt it, and by the end of this you will have a way to check whether it is happening to you right now. Start with the version you have probably heard. An egregore in the common telling is a thought form generated by a group, a collective mind. It begins when people gather around an idea. A religion, a nation, a company, a football club, a forum. Attention feeds it. Ritual strengthens it. The group's emotion is its food. And past a certain point, the story goes, it develops something that behaves like a will of its own. Then the strange part, the egregore starts to protect itself. It rewards the members who defend it and punishes the ones who question it, not through any mechanism anyone designed, through the members themselves who begin to act on its behalf without deciding to. You can see why this idea spreads. It explains something people notice and cannot name. The way a group takes on a personality, the way that personality survives when every original member is gone, the way you can walk into a room and feel that the room already has opinions. It is a good story, and it has a problem. The problem is that it explains too much. If any group of people focused on anything can produce an autonomous entity, then the word covers your country, your church, your family, your workplace, the comment section of a video, and 4 people in a group chat. A concept that includes everything distinguishes nothing. And notice what the popular version never does. It never tells you where it came from. It arrives fully formed, with confident detail about how egregores feed and how they defend themselves, and no account of who first said so. That absence is the interesting part. Hold that, it gets stranger. The oldest layer of this word is not occult at all. It is Greek, and it is a participle, egregoros. It means wakeful, awake, the one who is not sleeping. In its plural form, egregore, it appears in the Greek text of the Book of Enoch, where it renders a Hebrew word irin. Both words mean the same thing, the watchers. In that text, the watchers are angels assigned to observe humanity. That is their function. They watch, they do not intervene, and they are not supposed to. Then, according to the narrative, some of them do intervene. They descend, they take human wives. And the offspring of those unions are the Nephilim, the giants of that tradition. The Book of Enoch is not part of the Hebrew Bible or of most Christian canons. It survived largely through the Ethiopian church, and it circulated in fragments elsewhere. That survival matters for how the word traveled. A text that sits outside the canon is read by a narrower group, and that group tends to be people who are looking. Scholars, translators, and in the 19th century, occultists building systems. So the word did not arrive in French through common usage. It arrived through people who went to find it. What matters here is narrower than the theology. The word that later meant collective thought form originally named an angel whose entire job was attention. And there is one more detail in that story worth holding. The watchers do not fall by rebelling. There is no war in this version. They fall by becoming interested. They were placed above the world to observe it, and observation turned into involvement, and involvement turned into dissent. The failure mode of a watcher is not malice. It is attention that does not stay still. Hold that too. It comes back at the end, and it changes what all of this means. Now the rhyme. In the middle of the 19th century, Victor Hugo was writing the long sequence of poems published as La Légende des siècles. The first series appeared in 1859. He had been composing the pieces for several years before that. The word egregore appears in the section called Le Jour des Rois, and here is the couplet, because the couplet is the argument. Hugo is describing a young man who frightens old men. He knows the art, the verse says, of summoning the demon, the stryge, the egregore, and in the very next line he stains his dagger with the juice of the mandrake. Egregore, mandragore. The rhyme is exact and it is doing work. Notice what the word means there. It is a thing you summon. It sits in a list between a demon and a stryge, which is a night creature that drinks blood. Whatever Hugo meant, he did not mean a collective mind produced by a group. The suffix on this reading exists because the rhyme required it. Hugo took a Greek term for a wakeful angel and gave it a French ending that would chime with a plant. This is the point where I want to be careful about categories. That the word appears in that couplet, in that work published in that year, is documented. The page can be read. That Hugo coined it, and coined it to complete the rhyme, is the reading of the scholars who catalog his vocabulary. It is a strong reading, and the rhyme is sitting right there. It is still not the same kind of claim as a date. What is not in doubt is the effect. Hugo was read everywhere. A word that might have appeared once and vanished instead entered the language and stayed. So a poet made the word, who made the meaning. For that we go to Paris about 30 years later, and to a young man with a large library. Stanislas de Guaita was a French occultist and a co-founder of the Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Cross. He worked in the dense, systematizing style of French occultism in that period, which took ideas from many traditions and tried to arrange them into a single architecture. The most widely accepted attribution is that de Guaita is the one who took egregore and made it a noun with the meaning you know, not a watching angel, a force, and his version is narrower than the modern one. On his account, the term names a personification of forces that are physical or psychophysical, and specifically not supernatural. That last part gets dropped almost everywhere the word is used today. Read that again because it is the whole difference. He was not describing a spirit. He was describing something real and impersonal that we handle by giving it a face. That distinction is doing more work than it looks. A supernatural claim asks you to accept a new kind of thing in the world. A psychophysical one does not. It says that patterns of human attention produce effects that behave from the inside like an agent, and that treating them as an agent is a useful compression, not a discovery. If 100 people in a room all lean the same way, the room does lean. No ghost is required. The leaning is real, it is measurable, and it will push you. That is a claim you can test. The version circulating today, with entities that feed and defend and hunger, is not. It has been inflated back into the supernatural register that de Guaita, on this reading, was trying to leave. Which brings us to the man who called all of this a mistake. René Guénon was a French writer on metaphysics and tradition, and he was not a friendly critic of 19th century occultism. He read the sources in their original languages, and he had little patience for what he saw as invention dressed up as transmission. His objection to egregore is specific. He argued that the collective entity meaning rests on a false etymology. That whoever attached that sense to the word did so by confusing it with a different Latin root, the one behind egregious, meaning set apart from the flock. And his conclusion is blunt. The word never meant anything in reality other than watcher. If he is right, then the entire modern apparatus, the feeding, the defending, the collective will, is built on a mistranslation that became a tradition because nobody checked. That happens more than people think. A term crosses from one language into another, arrives slightly wrong, and the wrongness is what gets systematized. So who is right? Here is my honest reading, and I will mark it as a reading. Guénon is almost certainly correct about the etymology and almost certainly missing the point about the usage. He is correct that the Greek says watcher. Nothing in the ancient word carries collective or generated or fed by attention. Anyone claiming the ancients had a doctrine of egregores in the modern sense is reading backwards, but a word's history does not govern what it can name. Words drift, and the drift is not always error. Sometimes a term gets attached to a phenomenon nobody had named yet, and the attachment is what makes the phenomenon visible. Because something is happening, whatever we call it, you have been inside one. So if I think of a group you were part of for a long time, not a casual one. A group with an inside and an outside, with things that are said and things that are not. Now remember the moment you first disagreed with it, not out loud, inside your own head. Notice what happened next. For most people, the first move is not to examine the disagreement. It is to look for a way to make the disagreement go away. You find yourself arguing against yourself on the group's behalf, using the group's own phrases. That is the part that deserves attention. Nobody instructed you. Nobody was watching. The defense ran on its own. And there is a second layer which is harder to admit. The defense usually arrives with a feeling attached, and the feeling comes first. Something like discomfort or a small drop in the stomach before any argument has formed. The argument arrives afterwards to explain the feeling. It presents itself as the reason when it is closer to a translation. This is why disagreements inside a tight group are so rarely settled by evidence. The evidence is not what is holding the position. It was recruited later to give the position a respectable shape. And if the concept is wrong at the origin, why does the description fit so exactly? There's a plain answer, and it does not require any spirits. A group holds more attention than you do. It has more hours, more members, and more repetitions. Every belief inside it has been rehearsed thousands of times in the exact words that survive best. Your private objection has been rehearsed once, by you just now. That is the whole asymmetry. It is not that the group is wiser. It is that the group's version is more fluent, and fluency feels like truth. The smooth thought arrives first and the rough one arrives second, and you experience that ordering as agreement. This is also why leaving a group is disorienting rather than liberating. The fluent sentences remain available for years. They keep arriving first. There's a way to test this. It takes about a minute. Take one belief you hold, choose one that matters and one you would defend in public. First question, where did it come from? Not whether it is true, where you got it. Can you name the moment, the argument, or the evidence? Or does it seem to have always been there? A belief with no origin story is not necessarily false, but it did come from somewhere, and if you cannot find the somewhere, you did not arrive at it. You received it. Second question. What happens if you say the opposite out loud to the group? Sit with the picture, not the argument you would have. The temperature change, who stops meeting your eye. If the cost of stating the opposite is social rather than intellectual, if what stops you is the room and not the evidence, then the belief is being held in place by something other than your judgment. Third question, does it survive when you are alone, somewhere with no audience, no feed, nobody to perform for? Does the conviction stay the same size? Some do. Those are yours. Some shrink the moment the room is gone and reinflate the moment you return to it. Those are the groups, and you are carrying them. 3 questions, origin, cost, and solitude. A note on how to run them because the order is not arbitrary. Origin comes first because it is the least threatening. You are only asking where something came from, and the honest answer is often simply that you do not remember. That is a low-cost admission, and it loosens the next one. Cost comes second because by then you have already conceded that you do not know the origin, and the question of what the room would do lands differently. Asked first, it feels like an accusation. Asked second, it feels like arithmetic. Solitude comes last because it is the one that actually hurts, and because the first 2 have already done most of the work by the time you reach it. Run them in that order on one belief, and the whole thing takes a minute. Run them out of order, and you will usually stop at the first flinch. Most people, doing this honestly, find at least one belief that fails all 3. That is not a crisis. It is the expected result, and the reason is structural rather than personal. No one has time to derive every conviction from first principles. Borrowing is how anyone functions. The practical distinction is between borrowed and unmarked as borrowed. A belief you know you inherited can be examined when it matters. A belief you experience as self-evident cannot, because there is nothing there to examine. So the work is not to purge the borrowed ones. It is to label them, mark it, keep it, and know that it is on loan. One warning before you use it. The moment you learn this, there is a temptation, and it ruins the whole thing. The temptation is to use it outward, to watch other people fail the 3 questions and feel that you are the one who is awake. That reaction is itself the mechanism running. Certainty about your own independence is exactly the belief that most needs the 3rd question, and it is the least likely to get it because it feels like clear sight rather than a position. The people most captured by a group are rarely the ones who feel captured. They feel clear-eyed. That feeling is not evidence of anything in you or in them. There is a further trap, and it is the one I fall into, knowing the mechanism does not switch it off. I can describe all of this and still catch myself defending a position I have not examined, in the exact words of a group I belong to, with the same drop in the stomach arriving first. The knowledge does not grant immunity. What it grants is a half-second of delay. That half-second is the entire benefit, and it is enough, because a belief you have paused on is already a belief you can hold at arm's length. Use it inward. When you use it outward, it stops being a test and becomes a weapon, and a weapon is something a group hands you. So what do we have? A Greek participle for an angel who stays awake, a French poet who needed a rhyme, an occultist who turned it into a force and said carefully that the force was not supernatural, and a scholar who read all of it and said the meaning was a mistake from the start. Guénon was probably right about the word, and the word is probably still useful because the thing it now names is real and observable and has been pushing on you since before you could read. Here is the part that took me longest to see. The modern version says that a group's attention builds an entity that then acts on the group. Guénon says the word only ever meant watcher. Those look like opposing claims. Put them together and they are not. The watchers in the old text did not create anything. They only paid attention, and what they paid attention to came down.